Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the 1041 Trust and Foundation workshop. This is what I call the unfair advantage that professional athletes, politicians, famous actors, and the wealthy elite use to legally and ethically not pay taxes. And we do this specifically so that you can keep your money and grow your money, and ultimately so you can fulfill your mission and purpose in life. Now, my goals for today, for this workshop, are very, very simple. It's twofold. Number one is to level up your mindset. Number two is to level up your skill set. Level up your mindset about what is possible for you and your family. And number two, to level up your skill set to learn this stuff so that you can apply it to your financial world and fund your purpose. Find your purpose and then fund your purpose. Now, before I jump into everything, let me introduce myself. My name is Sean Briscom, and a little known fun fact was I was a diver on the national team, trained for the Olympic team. From the time I was 8 years old, I got involved in the sport of diving, started traveling nationally and internationally. When I was 14 years old, I was shipped off away from home to go train with Greg Louganis and the whole Olympic team. There was Scott Doney, Ken Ferguson, Wendy Weiland, Wendy Williams, just tons of Olympians that I was able to travel and train with and learn from. And we experienced things that not many kids in America get to experience. In growing up in a middle-class family, I wasn't exposed to some of the wealthiest families around until I started traveling and training and diving, and got to meet these families and got to learn how they keep their money and grow their money and actually give back more. And so when I finished diving, when I finished competing and traveling, I got involved in a number of things. I've been involved in financial services for 18 years now. And before that, I was a manager at Dell Computer here in Austin, Texas. And at the time, we were making a lot of money at Dell through their stock options and employee stock purchase program, even their 401k, where we would put everything into Dell stock. And we became known as what they called us was Dellionaires. And at the ripe old age of 29, I retired. I sold all my stock options. I sold everything that I had purchased, even my 401k. I cashed out of my 401k and just moved everything into a money market account and played around Austin. I went water skiing every day. I traveled a lot. I bought a home, bought a Mustang Cobra, one of my favorite cars, and just thought I was retired. And at the end of the summer, a friend of mine contacted me who had been at Dell and said, hey, he had been flipping these domain names. At the time, buying and selling domain names was a huge thing here in Austin. A lot of people were making a lot of wealth, building a lot of wealth by selling domain names. They were selling for millions of dollars. And he had bought a bunch of domain names. A lot of them had Dell, the name Dell involved in them, like Dell Mall, Dell Shops, Dell Stock. He had sold those to Dell, made a bunch of money there, but he had a couple of others that he was keeping. And I asked him if he was going to flip them and make money, and he said, no, let's start a company. So at the ripe old age of 29, I jumped out of retirement, back into the workforce, started a new internet startup, and it exploded. We were doing really, really well. It was one of the first shopping malls of its kind on the internet. At the time, Amazon was available, but they were just selling books. And companies like Priceline.com were just in the travel space. So all of these companies were just doing one thing or in what we called a vertical industry, but nobody had really aggregated these companies together until we created the very first online shopping mall. And the way it worked was we would collect all the money in one shopping cart. You could check out one time, whether you went to JCPenney, J. Crew, Macy's, Dillard's, Neiman Marcus, wherever you were going online. You would put everything into your universal shopping cart and check out one time. We would escrow the money, and then we would pay those stores out. 30 days later, we would pay them their split minus our fee, of course. And during that 30-day float time, we were earning a ton of interest on all that cash flow that was coming through the business. And so after running that company for about a year, we ended up being approached by a couple of venture capital groups here in Austin. And in 2000, we ended up selling that company for a huge pile of cash. So here we were, 5 young guys in their 20s with a huge pile of cash in front of us. And rather than doing the right thing and taking some of the chips off the table, we decided to go all in and push our chips into the center of the table and double down on what we were doing. We started a second company that we expected to do 10 times what we had done in the first company. Okay, that was the goal, was to take the money we had made from the liquidity event, the sale of the first company, and earn what we called 10x returns on the second company. And of course, that was right during the dot-com bubble. And overnight, we literally, when the dot-com bubble burst, we ended up having to shut our doors. We laid off over 100 employees, and we were spending about $1 million a month on overhead and travel expenses, and that lifestyle just came crashing to a halt. And we had to hit the reboot button and start all over again. And it was at that time that I started talking to friends who were very successful investing in startups and in the internet game, but had gotten out of that dot-com world before the market crashed, before the bubble popped. And so I started asking them what they were doing next. And sure enough, a lot of people were getting into real estate. So I started in real estate lending and investing in 2000, and things were going really, really well. We were making a ton of money on the mortgage side of the business and the investing side of the business, and even in the real estate itself. But I had this weird gut feeling that it was too good to be true. It was just like the dot-com bubble. There was something wrong. There was this disconnect, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just knew that something bad was going to happen. And sure enough, in 2008, we were hit with one of the largest recessions in the history of our country. Okay, and of course, lost everything, had to hit the reboot button all over again. And so the reason I'm telling you all this is because I've done a lot of things right in my career, but I've also done a lot of things wrong. And if you're like me, if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur or an investor, and you've built some really big things only to see them come crashing to the ground and made a bunch of money only to lose it all, I call that cycling. And if you've cycled like I have a couple of times, the first thing I want to tell you is that it's not your fault. No, number one, there are outside forces globally that can impact your business and impact your wealth. And things like the market over in China can directly have an effect on the market here in the United States. How the European Union is doing can have a direct impact on the global economy in general. And so it's not necessarily your fault that you would get the rug pulled out from under you, but what would be your fault is if you don't learn from those mistakes that you've made. And so with that being said, I wanted to kind of teach you my 3 biggest takeaways that I got from surviving those 2 crashes, and how you can stabilize your wealth and not lose your money in these cycles, in these market crashes, in these bubbles. So after doing this for 17 plus years and surviving 2 financial crashes, there are a few things that I've learned. Number one is that we need to find a way to keep our wealth safe from everything, not just the market volatility, but from taxes, from inflation, from interest expenses, from lawsuits and divorces, everything out there that can attack your wealth and where you can leak that money out or lose that money. And Warren Buffett was famous for this quote. He said, "It's not what you make, it's what you..." That's right, it's what you keep. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. And he said that about his own money because Warren Buffett doesn't lose money. He doesn't leak money out to the government in the form of taxes. He doesn't lose money in the form of interest expenses. His wealth is completely protected and safe from any global market volatility or any crashes because he doesn't gamble his money away. But he also doesn't, that money is safe and protected from lawsuits, judgments, creditors, everything, using trusts and foundations. The second thing that you need to understand is how you can grow your wealth safely without risk. That's right. There are ways that you can protect the wealth and continue to have your money compound and grow safely with guarantees in a safe environment where you're not risking it in the market. And the third thing is that in order to do the first 2 things, in order to grow massive amounts of wealth, you first have to learn how to give it all away. That's right, you heard me correctly. In order to grow massive amounts of wealth, like the wealthiest families out there, the first thing you have to understand is how to give it all away. And I'll show you how to do that here in a second. Now, I discovered the hard way from all of these mistakes that I made, these horrible situations where I would build some really big things only to see it come crashing to the ground. But you get to learn from my mistakes. And if, Eleanor Roosevelt said this, she said, "Learn from the mistakes of others because you can't live long enough to make them all yourself." And so with that being said, here's the hard way to building and growing your wealth. The first hard way is by trusting CPA or a tax attorney or your tax preparer to do your taxes in the best way possible. You know, CPAs and tax attorneys and even trust attorneys are only licensed at the state level. And I'm going to show you why that's not the best way to protect your wealth against taxes. All right, so if you're just trusting your CPA or your tax preparer to do your taxes in the best way, 99.9% of the time, they don't know what I'm about to show you, okay? And it's not their fault. It's designed that way on purpose. They are literally isolated and insulated from these different ways of protecting your wealth. The other way, that's the hard way of building wealth and being able to grow your wealth, is by believing that your stockbroker or the market is the safest way to grow your wealth. That markets go up and down, but over the long run, you'll always make money. That's not true, okay? I'm about to show you why that's not true, and I'm going to show you how you can protect your wealth against that market volatility so that you continuously compound and grow your money, whether it's a good market or a bad market. The third way, that's the hard way, is by thinking that if you spend your money, if you create business expenses for your business, that's the best way to reduce your taxes. In other words, to create more deductions in your tax rate is the best way to lower your tax bill. That's an inefficient way of doing things, okay? I'm about to show you why here. Now, there's a huge difference between a CPA or a tax attorney or a trust attorney. Like I said, CPAs and tax attorneys and trust attorneys are only licensed in the state that they practice in. They're only state licensed. They're what we call statutory, which means state, okay? They are statutory in nature. The best people out there to hire to really show you what I'm about to show you are enrolled IRS agents. An enrolled agent is a tax advisor who's federally authorized tax practitioner empowered by the U.S. Department of Treasury. Enrolled agents represent taxpayers before the IRS or tax issues, including audits, collections, and appeals. Enrolled agent status is the highest credentialed award given by the IRS. Okay? There is no higher jurisdiction out there than an enrolled agent status. Likewise, if your tax attorney, CPA, or trust attorney is only licensed in the state, 99.9% of the time, they don't understand the UTC, the Uniform Trust Code, which is governed by the federal government, okay? There are 86 different types of trusts out there. Most of those trusts are statutory in nature, meaning they are only under state jurisdiction. What that means is that the IRS and other government organizations can actually pierce those trusts. They are not protected against government regulation and government oversight. All right? Only those that are federally licensed under the UTC are impenetrable, tried and true trusts. Okay? And out of 86 different types of trusts out there, there are only 4 that actually file what we call a 1041 tax return for trusts and estates. Now, if you want the easy way, which has allowed my wife and I to live a life of purpose and meaning, my wife and I have been in the foster care world for 10 years now. We've been blessed to have 6 kids come through our house, all through foster care, and love on them. We've adopted 2 kids and had one of our own. We're actively involved in foster care and adoption, and most of our friends, even today, are in the foster care community. Okay, this is where our heart is. This is where we spend all of our time, energy, money, and emotion is on these kids and helping them to heal from life's hurts. Most of the kids in the foster care system have been through tremendous amounts of trauma in their life, and that trauma has had an impact on their brain structure, their brain chemistry. And so what we've been able to do is through our foundation, our private family foundation, which I'll show you how to set one of those up. Through our foundation, we've been able to give back more to these kids that are in the foster care community to help them heal from those traumatic events. And we've also been able to give back more to foster families who are taking on the responsibility of these children. And so that's what we do. That's what our mission and purpose is in life, is to help these kids heal from life's hurts. And we do that through our private family foundation. Now, I want to stop here and tell you this is not a fit for everybody. It's just not. This system that has been around forever, since 1913, since the IRS was first formed, but it's not a fit for everybody. And so, one way of thinking about this is, it's expensive, it can be time consuming, it can be something that is extremely, extremely valuable, but you don't want to build a golden jewelry box if you don't have any diamonds to put into it. All right, so this isn't going to be a good webinar for you or a good workshop for you if you're not in a situation where it makes sense, where you're not paying a tremendous amount in taxes anyway. If you're in that situation where your tax bill is really, really low, then it's probably not going to be a fit for you. But if you're a business owner or entrepreneur or an investor and you want to be able to keep more of your tax dollars without having to create more deductions and spend that money, then this could be a good fit for you, okay? Now, if you stay till the end, I've got an extremely valuable offer for you that I put together. So do me a favor, pull out a pen and paper, start taking really good notes. I'm gonna jump into it right now and we'll get started. I'm gonna show you the fastest and easiest way to legally and ethically not pay taxes, just like professional athletes do, just like politicians do, and just like the wealthy elite do. Okay, now when you're doing this, there are three main key considerations that you have to think about. All right, the first one is that you can immediately learn how to keep 90% or more of your tax dollars just by copying exactly what these pro athletes and politicians and wealthy business owners and entrepreneurs do. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Everything is spelled out in the tax code. Everything is spelled out in the Universal Trust Code. There's nothing that's out of the ordinary or nothing unique here. It's all been around for ages, since 1913, like I said, when the IRS was first formed. Sorry to tell you, this is not brand new. This is not some shenanigans that we're pulling. This has all been around forever, over 106 years now. Okay. Now there's some good news and bad news here. The second key consideration is that the way that you're currently being taught to grow your money is actually holding you back. But the good news is that I can show you how to make up for lost time by growing your money faster, by keeping it and plugging those holes instead of leaking it out to the government, through interest expense, through inflation, through lawsuits, and all of the forces, the evil forces that are coming down and actually killing your nest egg, that are sucking money and wealth away from you. The third thing is that in order for you to do the first two things, you got to first learn how to give all of your money away. That's key here, and I'll show you how to do that. It's an amazing secret. It's kind of the black box secret of the wealthiest families out there. But in order to do the first two things, you first have to learn how to give it all away. Now, first thing, how professional athletes, politicians, business owners, and investors use the trust and foundation system to keep their money and grow their money so that they can give it away more effectively. Now, it's no secret that the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. That's what we call wealth inequality. Now, this is an interesting statistic. I wanted to show this to you. Did you know that 8 men in the world have as much wealth as 3.6 billion people? Think about that. 8 men have as much wealth as 3.6 billion people. You know, the gap between the top wage earners and bottom wage earners continues to widen every single day. And that's by design. You see, this information is not widely spread or widely known. The IRS doesn't want you to know this stuff. All right? That's why CPAs and tax attorneys are only licensed at the state level. The IRS doesn't want them to know federal UTC law and the stuff that enrolled agents know, okay? Now, wealthy typically teach other wealthy people this system. And I'll give you an example, a few examples here. Number one, Howard Buffett, he was a representative from Nebraska. And so he learned this system in Congress. Most politicians use the 1041 trust and foundation system. And so Warren Buffett just grew up in that environment where his family had a trust and his family had a foundation, and everything was owned by the trust or owned by the foundation. The family didn't really show any ownership of any assets or income. All right. Now, what's interesting is that in 2000, Microsoft was under investigation by the IRS, and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates met for the first time. After that meeting in 2000, Warren Buffett taught Bill Gates this system, and 6 weeks later, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was established. It is now one of the largest private family foundations on the planet. It's worth, there are over $51 billion in assets that are all tax exempt in the Bill and Melinda Gates Family Foundation. In 2015, Mark Zuckerberg was going to take Facebook public, and he met with Bill Gates. Bill Gates taught Mark Zuckerberg the Trust and Foundation system, and Mark Zuckerberg announced to the world that he would be donating 99% of his Facebook stock to charities. That's right, to charities. Now, what do you think he did with that money? What charity did he set up? That's right, he set up the Chan Zuckerberg Family Foundation, a private family foundation, and he gifted all of that wealth to the foundation. The foundation turned right around and now owns Facebook stock, and all of it is tax exempt. To prove that Congress knows this stuff, I wanted to show you this video clip real quickly. Listen to this video clip.
Mr. Whitaker, I want to go back to your time when you worked for the Foundation for Accountability and Civil Trust. I worked for many, many years for various 501c3. So it's very interesting to me when I look at the board. Is this a private or a public foundation? Fact. Was that the 501c3? Is it a private or a public?
I don't know.
There are two separate types.
Congresswoman, I don't have the 990 filings or
But you
any
worked
of those
there
documents.
from 2014 to 2017.
I was.
And
there.
you were the executive director for the foundation.
Yes, I was.
But you don't know if it's a private or a public.
I haven't worked for FACT in 16 months, and I in my preparation
Okay,
for this
thank you,
oversight hearing.
Mr. Whitaker.
Now, isn't that interesting? You know, the reality of the situation is that he knows exactly if it was a private or public foundation. In fact, it was a private foundation. Private foundations and public charities operate completely differently. Public charities are responsible for donating or granting 100% of the proceeds or money coming in for charitable work after all expenses and administrative costs. Private family foundations are not. In private family foundations, your job as trustee or director of that foundation is to grow the wealth so that, yes, ultimately you can do more charitable work. But it's not to give away all the money. It's to buy and sell assets inside of the trust, inside of that foundation. Okay? Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a private family charity. Warren Buffett has his own private family foundation. In fact, if you go to websites like this, like charitynavigator.org, you can see a list of private and public family foundations. If you look at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you can see that it says right here that this is a private independent foundation. This is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Here's the EIN number for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Yes, they do philanthropy. Yes, they do volunteerism. But yes, it is a 501c3, which means it is tax exempt, but it is a private non-operating foundation, which means this $51 billion in assets, they are not responsible for giving that money away. Their job as trustees of this foundation is to grow this wealth, and they are required to file what's called a 990 PF form. That's important. PF stands for Private Family Foundation or Private Foundation that is held in trust. Okay? And you can look at the actual tax returns here on this website and see exactly what they're invested in. You know, even Mark Zuckerberg, if you follow the same path to the same Charity Navigator website, let me show you this real quickly. I'll pull it up real quickly. You can see the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. Okay, Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. Here is the EIN number for the foundation. It's based in Palo Alto, California. It is a private grant-making foundation. It is still a 501c3, which means all of the wealth and the assets inside the foundation are tax exempt, but it is a private non-operating foundation. What that means is they are responsible for filing a 990 PF form, which stands for private foundations. Okay? Now that's important, and I'll show you why that's important here in a minute. But this information is passed down from generation to generation. These wealthy families keep this information inside of their bloodline and just teach their kids how to use this system. John D. Rockefeller is a perfect example of that. You know, he started his own foundation back in 1882 and his own family trust, and today that foundation is worth over $10 billion. He didn't start with $10 billion. How did the foundation grow to have a wealth of, or an asset base of over $10 billion? You know, Nelson Rockefeller is now the patriarch of that family, and every single year the family meets at an undisclosed location and they have a family retreat. Part of the requirements of the foundation is to have a retreat and talk about charitable giving. The foundation pays for the retreat for all family members. Travel expenses, accommodations, entertainment, food, everything that's involved in that retreat. There are over 130 family members in the Rockefeller family now, okay? In 2014, Nelson Rockefeller said this to his family members. He said, "The secret to success is to own nothing, but to control everything." Let me say that again. The secret to success is to own nothing, but to control everything. So this whole concept has to do with ownership versus control. You see, in America, we're taught, trained, and educated that the way to build wealth is to own everything, to own more stuff, own more land, own more real estate, own more stocks. But when you own things, you're taxed on it. If you give up ownership, but maintain control, maintain stewardship, then you're not taxed on it. It's not taxed the same. Here's another great example. Warren Buffett. When the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was first established, Warren Buffett donated or granted $34 billion to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And every year after that, he's been giving away more and more of his wealth to quote unquote charities. This article came out in July when he had his next tax bill due. He donated $3.4 billion to Gates and family charities. What do you think Bill and Melinda Gates do with that wealth that Warren Buffett is giving them? What do you think they do with the money? The interesting thing is the very next day this article came out. It says the Gates Foundation is now one of Berkshire Hathaway's largest shareholders. That's right. So what they're doing is they're taking in these grants and donations from from Warren Buffett, and turning right around and buying Berkshire Hathaway stock. Warren Buffett sits on the board of directors of the Gates Foundation, by the way. He's one of the fiduciaries. He helps to manage the wealth of that foundation. Mark Zuckerberg does the same thing. This article came out recently, says Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg becomes the world's third richest person passing Warren Buffett. Now at the bottom here you can see it says Buffett, once one of the world's richest persons, is sliding in ranking thanks to his charitable giving, which he kicked off in earnest in 2006. He donated about 290 million Berkshire Hathaway Class B shares to charities, most of it to the Gates Foundation. These shares are now worth more than $50 billion. Again, we just looked at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the value of the wealth inside of that foundation is $51 billion. Zuckerberg has pledged to give away 99% of his Facebook stock in his lifetime. Where is he giving that wealth away? That's right. He's giving it to his own private family foundation. Why would he do that? So he can turn right around and donate that money or give that money, to turn right around and buy Facebook stock with that wealth, with that money. Okay? That's how the game is played. Ellen DeGeneres is another perfect example. Ellen DeGeneres recently was given $4 million when Ashton Kutcher came on her show. In fact, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that video real quick.
So we do this thing called sound benches. We invest in tech companies. And so we found this very interesting tech company called Ripple that we're going to invest in, right? And it runs on this stuff called XRP, which is a cryptocurrency, but basically it's just a way to get value from here to there. The people who run it, this guy Chris Larson and a guy named Brad Garlinghouse, and they run it, and they're talking about the ethic of this company and this platform, and how they actually really care about being an ethical company and giving a portion of this platform away to people that are doing good in the world. And you explained to me that if you weren't doing this, that what you would be working on is that project, right?
Yeah, I would be saving the gorillas, yes.
You would be saving the gorillas. And so we talked to Chris and Brad, and we said, there's this amazing human being, and all they ever do is think about other people they can give to. Whether it's in New Orleans, whether it's in Montecito, whether it's the people that come here, the people out there, you're always thinking about everyone else. And we wanted to show you that people are thinking about you. So, on behalf of Ripple, we'd like to give you $4 million. Now, usually people come out with the big giant check and do the big giant check thing, but we can actually transfer it into Rwandan francs right now, right here, and all we have to do is push this button and it's in your account. Do you want to push it? You want me to push it?
I would like to push it. I'd like to push it real good.
Bingo.
Okay, so what actually happened there? What actually took place? Well, Ripple, a company that is in Ashton Kutcher's hedge fund, donated or gifted $4 million to Ellen DeGeneres' foundation. What do you think Ellen DeGeneres does with that money? What do you think she did? That's right, she turned right back around and bought shares in Ashton Kutcher's hedge fund, his tech fund, in the form of Ripple stock. Now, when Ripple goes public and the IPO pops, all of that gain is now tax exempt. It's tax free. Okay? Let me show you Ellen DeGeneres' information here. This is the Ellen DeGeneres Wildlife Fund. Here's the AIN number. The Ellen DeGeneres Wildlife Fund was set up in Encino, California. It is animal related. It is a charitable organization, a 501c3, which means it's tax exempt. It is a private, non-operating foundation, and it files a 990-PF form. Okay? So again, this is just another example of how money is moved to private foundations for tax purposes so that that money can grow and earn interest and balloon up, all tax exempt and tax free. Now, Ellen does a lot of charitable work, don't get me wrong. So does Bill Gates. He does a ton of charitable work. They're very giving, very generous people. But this is how the system is set up. All right, I'm just showing you this as an example. Andy Roddick is another great example. When I was in Mission Viejo training with the Olympic team, my roommate was Andy's older brother, Lawrence Roddick. And Lawrence and I were roommates at the time. When Andy turned 17 and turned professional, he went to go visit Andre Agassi, asking Andre for advice. And one of the questions he asked Andre Agassi, and I remember him telling us this story, was he asked Andre Agassi, do you have any regrets? What is the biggest regret you have in your tennis career? And Andre Agassi responded by saying, I wish I hadn't waited so long to start my foundation. Think about that. Of all the missteps, all the mistakes that Andre Agassi made, both on and off the court, his biggest regret was not starting his foundation soon enough. And so today, the Andre Agassi Foundation has raised over $180 million over just the last 22 years. Now, Andre does a ton of charitable work. He's set up the Andre Agassi Prep Academy in Las Vegas. He has given scholarships and funded tons and tons and tons of kids to actually go and get a better education at his school. He does a lot of good in the world. But make no mistake about it, all of that money in the foundation is put into assets that are growing and compounding tax-free. All right? Same is true with Nancy Pelosi. Think about this. This was a tweet that came out not too long ago. Nancy Pelosi's been in Congress 28 years with an annual salary of $193,400. So how is her net worth nearly $200 million today? Even if she invested 100% of that salary and paid zero taxes for 3 decades, 30 years, and got a 10% return on investment, she would only be worth about $30 million at most today. So let's take a look at what she did. And here it is. The Paul and Nancy Pelosi Charitable Foundation. Here's the EIN number, okay? It's in San Francisco, which is where she resides and where she is representing. It is a charitable organization, a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. It is a private, non-operating foundation. Filing what? A 990-PF. Okay, private foundation. Again, private foundations and public charities operate differently. So you know the names out there, Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Kennedys, the list goes on. These are America's richest families, people that live too large to live in mere mansions, so they live in compounds like Cape Cod in Florida and Maine. They are treated like American royalty. They literally have wealth that's created family dynasties that last for years and decades and even generations. It just continues to grow. All right, they have institutions named after them, like Vanderbilt University or the Rockefeller Center or the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. So why is it that you never hear about one of these families going belly up or losing hundreds of millions of dollars during these market crashes like in 1929, 1987, 2000, or 2008? Well, the short answer is they play by a completely different set of rules. There are two different tax systems in the United States. There's one for the informed and one for the uninformed, and both are legal. These families play by a totally different set of rules. They don't leave their wealth up to the whims of the market. They protect their wealth against these obstacles like taxes, divorces, interest expense, inflation, and lawsuits. So what separates us from them? Number one, they don't take risks. Instead, what they do is they put their trust in these timeless financial principles. These principles that include tax law, federal contract law, and even constitutional law, okay? This allows them to take advantage of these systems and wealth building opportunities that you and I have never heard of. They use little known strategies that make these market volatilities and crashes and gyrations completely irrelevant. They're able to keep their wealth instead of leaking their money out to Uncle Sam. And they're able to grow their wealth from generation to generation so they can truly accomplish anything they want. While we dream of taking vacations, they actually go out and buy islands. Richard Branson has his own foundation. While we donate our time to hospitals, they actually build hospitals. Steven Spielberg's another example. He built the Pediatric Research Center. John Hopkins was a famous Baltimore businessman. He left his fortune of $7 million to his private family foundation and created the Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Hospital. While we attend universities, they build colleges and universities. Wells College was named after Wells Fargo creator Henry Wells. Rockefeller University was created by the Rockefeller family. So, do you think these guys know something that we don't? While everybody else in America is following institutions like Wall Street and banks, we don't even know what the richest families know because up until now, it's been kept a secret. Nobody knows their strategies until now. You know, up until now, for most Americans and most people, wealth isn't something easily obtained. The average American has to work longer and harder than ever just to make ends meet. All the while, 70% of people out there hate their jobs and they're miserable in their lives. We live paycheck to paycheck, and most people don't even have savings, or even worse, they don't have a retirement plan. The government shutdown was another issue. It spotlighted a huge problem. 78% of U.S. workers live paycheck to paycheck. How is that possible? It's no wonder that the current state of retirees is just dismal. Less than 2% of all Americans actually are retiring comfortably. 45% of people are dependent on relatives. 23% are still working into retirement. 30% of people are dependent on charities or the government for subsidies. Think about this. During 2012, at the height of the market crash, the real estate crash, $154 billion was sucked out of the markets. During that same year, the world's 100 richest people became $241 billion richer. Do you think that's a coincidence? You know, Donald Trump is another example. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were having a debate in 2016, right before the election. And Hillary Clinton called him out for not paying taxes in 30 years. And do you remember how he responded? He said, "That just makes me smart." In fact, let's listen to that right now.
I will release my tax returns against my lawyer's wishes when she releases her 33,000 emails that have been deleted. As soon as she releases them, I will release my tax returns.
So you've got to ask yourself, why won't he release his tax returns? And I think there may be a couple of reasons. First, maybe he's not as rich as he says he is. Second, maybe he's not as charitable as he claims to be. Third, we don't know all of his business dealings, but we have been told through investigative reporting that he owes about $650 million to Wall Street and foreign banks. Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for...
All right, I think you get the idea. When you research this stuff and you look at the Clinton Family Foundation, okay, what you come to find is that the Clinton family does the exact same thing. Here's their EIN number. It's the Clinton Family Foundation. This is a private, independent foundation. It is a tax-exempt organization, private, non-operating foundation that files, that's right, a 990-PF form. That stands for private foundations. Okay? That's how this game is played by the wealthy elite. And so let me share with you a secret blueprint that the politicians and the elite have been using for generations to grow their wealth. This is something that I use with my family as well. So this is not just reserved for the top 1% income earners. This is not just reserved for the wealthy elite. I call this the purpose-driven blueprint. Now, this is not theory. This has been used legally and ethically by myself and others for generations. Now, one of the strategies that I teach people in this system is how to collapse time. Perfect example of this is a client of mine named Roger. Roger was a physician, and he came to me a while ago with $1 million in debt and no chance of retiring. He literally thought that he was going to have to work the rest of his life into retirement. And by using the trust and foundation system, what we were able to do was in 4 short years, he was literally able to pay off over $1 million in debt and simultaneously save $4.3 million for retirement. He did all of this by using the trust and foundation system, all while protecting his money against inflation, interest expense, lawsuits, volatility in the market, all in a foundation, trust and foundation structure. All right. Another great example is Nicole and Jason Bruner. Nicole and Jason are 27 and 29. They're millennials. And they're a fascinating couple. I love working with them. Jason, when Jason graduated from Ole Miss, he started his own air conditioning company. And year number 1 in the business, he made about $80,000. And they were super excited that they could bring in that kind of income. But it was kind of like $80,000 in the front door, $80,000 out the back door. They really didn't have anything to show for it. The second year, it almost doubled. They made over $150,000 in income. But it was the same thing. It was $150 in the front door and $150 out the back door. Fast forward 4 short years later, that business is bringing in $1.4 million last year in 2018. Their tax bill alone for that year, 2018, would have been $400,000. Now, the cool thing about Jason and Nicole is they're also foster parents. They have a heart for foster care and adoption, just like my wife and I do. And all they want to do is take care of these kiddos. All right? By setting them up with the trust and foundation system, they're able to keep that $400,000 in taxes. They keep that money and they're able to direct that money to their private foundation where they can actually go out and help more kids in the foster care system. Now, I know all of this sounds really strange, but like I said before, we have 2 tax systems in America, and that's intentional. That's not by accident, it's by design. And taxes have to do with ownership versus control. You see, taxes follow title. All right. In the 1040 world, the goal is to own everything. And so whether you're a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC, a sole proprietor, or just an independent contractor, it doesn't matter. You still own the income and own the businesses. All right. You own the assets. You own the real estate properties. You own those things. When you own things, when you're on the title of those things, then you pay taxes on those things. But if you give up ownership of those things, but maintain control or stewardship, now you're not taxed the same. Okay, so we're talking about two different systems. We're talking about the 1040 system, which 99.9% of all CPAs and tax attorneys understand and they're taught, trained, and educated on, versus the 1041 trust and foundation system. Both of these systems have been around since 1913, when the IRS was first formed. Both of these systems have a top tax rate of 37%. But the difference is that in the trust and foundation system, you can completely avoid, not evade, evasion is illegal, avoidance is legal. You can legally avoid capital gains tax. You can legally avoid state tax. State tax is also based on federal income. You can completely avoid property tax or ad valorem tax. You can avoid estate tax and probate cost. And all of this has to do with this weird statistical anomaly that a lot of economists use today. It's called the Rule of 97. And it goes like this. In 1897, 97% of all Americans, all people in this country, were business owners or employers. Only 3% of Americans were employees or apprentices. They worked for the 97%. So 97% of everybody in this country controlled their income. They were the shopkeepers. They were the people that were creating businesses and building wealth for themselves. 3% of Americans worked for the 97%. 100 years later, there was a huge demographic shift as people closed down their family businesses and went to go work in the factory. What happened was they shifted from being wealth creators or business owners to employees. And so in 1997, those numbers flip-flopped and only 3% of Americans were business owners or owned their own businesses or were entrepreneurs. The rest of us, 97% of us, went to work for corporate America. And what that did was it gave Congress writes the IRS, writes the tax laws. The IRS enforces the tax laws. So it gave Congress the authority to change the tax laws every single time a new administration came around. And so I have up on the screen here the original tax brackets back in 1913. This is interesting. Did you know back in 1913, the lowest income tax bracket was 1%? 1. When the IRS was first formed, it was supposed to only be for 1 year to collect taxes to help build out the infrastructure of our country. We needed roads, we needed railway construction, we needed bridges, we needed all of the infrastructure built out. And so the government decided to collect tax from the citizens, but the lowest rate was 1%. The highest rate was only 7%. 7. The lowest rate was on income earners who made $20,000 a year or more back in 1913. Think about that. $20,000 back in 1913 is the equivalent of over $480,000 today. So if you made the equivalent of $480,000 back in 1913, you were only taxed at 1%. If you made $500,000 a year or more back in 1913, that was the equivalent of over $12 million today. And if you did that, if you made the equivalent of $12 million back in 1913, in today's dollars, you only paid 7% tax. It wasn't 37%, and it wasn't 50%, which is the estate tax now. And so, again, we have two tax systems in America. There's one for the informed and one for the uninformed, and both are legal. That was a quote by a guy named Judge Billings Learned Hand. Judge Hand was on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, the United States Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit in New York, for tax matters. And he is one of the most quoted judges in Supreme Court history as it pertains to tax matters. He said this. He said, in America, there are two tax systems, one for the informed and one for the uninformed, and both are legal. Wealthy people also understood this tax system, like the Rothschild brothers. The Rothschild brothers are famous for this quote: "The few who understand this system will be so interested in its profits and the rest so dependent on its favors, there will be no opposition from either class." So again, this has to do with ownership versus control. If you insist on owning everything, owning your business, owning your assets, owning your incomes, you're going to be taxed on it. Liability also follows title. So not just taxes, but liability. And if you buy into these trusts that are, like grantor trusts or statutory trusts, remember there are 86 different types of trusts out there. Only 4 trusts actually fall on a 1041 tax return. The rest of them are all statutory in nature. If you buy into those statutory trusts, then those trusts can be pierced by government agencies, including the IRS. But if you have the right type of trust, which falls under the UTC, the Universal Tax Code, then you're literally shifting the tides. You're changing the game, and you get asset protection. You're protected against lawsuits, judgments, creditors, even the IRS, even government agencies, through tried and tested powerful clauses. This is stuff that has been tested at the Supreme Court level. Also, the nature of fiat currency, if you're holding cash in a money market fund or in a bank account, currently you're losing 3 to 4% a year on that money through depreciation, through inflation. And with this trust and foundation system, you can completely mitigate that loss. You can protect your money against the generational wealth, against alimony, child support, divorces, lawsuits. Think about the Kennedy family, starting with Joe Kennedy. If everybody in the Kennedy family had to give up 50% of their wealth every time they got divorced, why is it that the Kennedys are not penniless at this point? The 1041 tax system, the trust and foundation system, was actually designed for these wealthy families back in 1913 for philanthropic and generational legacy. And so let me explain how it works. Right now, how you're taking your income and your assets, what you're focused on is ownership, not control. You want to own everything. And again, if you own everything, then you're taxed on everything. But how does the 1% always win this game? They give up ownership of the assets, but they maintain total control of all the assets and all the income. So you got to think about your business framework and structure. Are you renting an entity from the state? Like, are you in a C Corp, S Corp situation? Are you in a sole proprietorship or an LLC? Those are all statutory in nature, so you have to follow the state laws. Or have you created your own independent entity that is separate, that is federally licensed and regulated? How do you hold your assets? Are they held by you personally? If you're holding your assets personally and titling them in your name or even in your LLC name, then you're responsible for paying tax on those assets. How do you receive and draw your income? Are your businesses and real estate holdings and income structured in a tax-efficient way? Why would you want to structure it this way? Well, it's simple. It drastically reduces your personal, federal, state, and local taxes. Think about this. No more county taxes. No more property taxes. You get total avoidance of capital gains tax, total avoidance of estate and inheritance tax, no more probate costs, total protection of assets from all lawsuits, judgments, creditors, liabilities, everything. Total protection against divorces. The trustee, the person who is the trustee of these trusts, enjoys total control over all incomes and assets. This also protects you from domestic and international incomes and assets. If you have a business that's receiving money from international money from overseas, this works for you too. Okay? This wealth stays in your bloodline from generation to generation. Nobody can touch the assets inside of these trusts. These entities are literally institutions, and they remain viable, protecting your income and assets from generation to generation to generation. Your incomes and assets remain totally protected from all creditors, including government agencies like the IRS. And this allows you to create philanthropic legacies and endowments that go on from generation to generation. Now, most of us grew up thinking that the key to building wealth was to own more stuff. That's not always true. In fact, I used to believe the exact same thing until just a few years ago. I had to literally shift my mindset from owning everything to giving up ownership, but maintaining stewardship, maintaining control. Giving up ownership, but maintaining control. And I stopped asking myself, how am I going to own more things? And I started asking myself, how am I going to learn the skill set that I need to keep my money and grow my wealth from generation to generation? Now, the second key consideration that we talked about, this is the good news, bad news situation. The way that you're currently being taught to grow your money is actually holding you back from accomplishing your mission and purpose, from helping you fulfill your purpose in life. The good news, though, is that you can immediately collapse time and grow your wealth quickly with much less risk. Roger, that client of mine, the doctor, was 57 years old. He had about 8 years left before retirement. He had no retirement savings. And he came to me because he was over $1 million in debt with no retirement savings. He literally thought that he was going to have to work for the rest of his life. And in 4 short years, we were able to pay off $1 million in debt and simultaneously save him $4.3 million for him to live off of, all by using the trust and foundation system. Okay, so think about this. How do you keep your wealth? How do you protect your wealth? Do you buy into the notion of traditional trusts? Remember, there are 86 different types of trusts in America. Most of those are statutory in nature. What type of trust do you have? Did you know there are only 4 trusts that actually file a 1041 tax return? Do you leave your assets and incomes up to the mercy of brokers and rigged markets? Are you one of those people that leaves your hard-earned money at the bank earning less than 1% a year in savings or money market accounts, where your banks can actually take that money and earn 400 to 1,300% profit by lending your capital out to other people? Or are you the one who borrows from the bank for business growth and asset purchases and financing your lifestyle? Do you use credit cards and other loans to actually grow your business and pay for things? Do you put your hard-earned money back into the coffers of the banks in the form of interest expense? Have you protected your liquid assets from inflation year after year after year, generation to generation? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, okay, this is great and everything. That's what Warren Buffett does. That's what Bill Gates does. That's what Ellen DeGeneres does. But I'm not Warren Buffett. I'm not Bill Gates. I'm not Ellen DeGeneres. And if you're thinking that, then you're absolutely wrong, okay? The principle that you have to understand first before anything will change is that you've got to keep what you've built. You've got to keep what you've built. Stop leaking your wealth out to the government and other entities. The ultra-rich understand that they're able to spend their money and use that wealth without ever having to dip into their savings or drop down to zero. They're able to have their wealth grow and compound from generation to generation and still enjoy their lives freely. All right, now the third key ingredient here is that in order to do the first 2 things, you have to first learn how to give it all away. What do I mean by that? Well, traditional estate planning is completely flawed because traditional estate planning is just a method of focusing on ownership of the assets inside of a trust or inside of your own LLC or your own business, and then distributing that wealth to beneficiaries when you die. And when you do that, when you have that situation, you're not really using a trust. It's really just a 2-party contract. Okay? Those trusts are statutory in nature, which means they have to follow state law. They focus on complex structures like C Corps and S Corps and grantor trusts, and they attempt to hide money from Uncle Sam by playing this shell game. It's a lot more confusing using those systems, using the 1040 system and using those types of trusts. They provide expensive estate planning setups that are still subject to scrutiny by the IRS and other government organizations. It's also flawed because in the new economy, you can't predict the future. There's so much market uncertainty and volatility that it makes it literally impossible to plan for your future. And every administration that comes around, they change the rules of the game. The tax code is changed every single time there's a new administration. So how do you grow your assets? Well, the golden rule, the rule number one is never ever lose your capital. Never lose your capital. So think to yourself, think about it, just your own situation. Are you recapturing all of your tax savings at every single level, at the local level, at the county level, at the state level, at the federal government level? Are you paying property taxes? Are you paying sales taxes? Are you paying all of those different areas and those different levels of tax? Are you paying interest to yourself first, or are you paying someone else interest, like a bank? Are you financing your business, your asset purchases, your lifestyle, or are you able to lend to others with the same kind of profitability that banks get? Are you able to guarantee the security of your money, your cash, or is it up for grabs if you lose it? So it's no wonder why only 2% of retired Americans are actually self-sustaining. All of the money is being leaked out of their system. So most people have given up. Most people just say, let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. They've given up hope of retiring or being self-sufficient. Now, the good news is that I can teach you what the elite 1% do so you can copy exactly what they're doing instead of living like a broke college kid. You can actually live out your golden years and have an even better quality of life with more meaning and more purpose and more fulfillment than you actually were when you were working. Think about the American dream for a second, where you put in 20 or 30 years of work and then you retire, you get to travel, you get to enjoy your family, your golden years, you get to do all the things that you couldn't do while you were working to make up for all those sacrifices. Well, that dream died decades ago for a lot of people, but it's still a reality for the top 1%. It can also be a reality for you if you just change how you look at keeping and growing and building your wealth. That dream, it doesn't have to be just a dream that the ultra rich get to live by. You and I can practice this exact same system. So do you see why I'm so passionate about teaching this system? I don't want you to live out your golden years like a broke college kid. Here's an example. We talked about it before. My wife and I started this foundation called Kind Foundation a couple of years ago. This is actually, you can see the effective date of the exemption was at the end of 2017. And I want you to read what it says here at the bottom. It says, "Dear applicant, we are pleased to tell you that we've determined that you are exempt from federal income tax under IRC Section 501c3. That's just the section of the code that makes this entity, this EIN number 826797158, tax exempt. Okay? Now, I want you to see this in the bottom here. It says Form 990PF required. Form 990PF required. Okay? Now, this is a foundation that is held in trust. And so an example is this declaration of trust. It's the exact same EIN number, which is our Kind Foundation, but it says Kind Foundation is made in Williamson County, state of Texas, on the 26th day of September between myself and my wife as founders and myself and my wife as trustees. So the founders hereby transfer all property to the trustees, and the trustees hereby declare and agree that they have received this day from the individuals, donors, in the sum of, and we just set it up initially with $10. Since then, we've moved a lot of our assets into the foundation, a lot of our cash into the foundation, a lot of our holdings into the foundation, and all of that now is under the 501c3 code, which makes it completely tax exempt. This is an example of a 990PF form. And you can see at the top, it says Return of Private Foundation. Right underneath it, it says Section 4947A1. This is a trust treated as a private foundation. This is the exact same foundation that Bill Gates has set up with the Gates Family Foundation. Warren Buffett has this set up. Mark Zuckerberg has this set up. And Ellen DeGeneres has set up, okay? This is the actual tax return that needs to be filed every single year. This was the first one that we filed back in 2017, okay? Now, let me pause there. Let me ask you a question. How many of you think that you've learned a lot so far? This stuff can be very, very overwhelming. I get it. So how many of you are feeling a little overwhelmed because we've just covered so much information so far? Yeah, so in the past hour, would you agree that this has been time well spent so far? You know, would you agree that we can't really cover everything that you need to know in an hour or in a workshop, or even if we had all day, to be honest with you? So let me ask you, is it okay if I spend about 10 minutes going over that special offer that I've developed just to help you implement everything that we talked about? Okay, listen to this. I want to introduce you to this. This is what I call the purpose-driven blueprint. And this is a process that I created. The purpose-driven blueprint is a system that I created out of necessity. And so here's what you're going to get. First thing you're going to get is what we call the purpose-driven blueprint. The purpose-driven blueprint is a process where we talk about all what you're passionate about, what your unique talents and abilities are, what your values are that have been handed down from your parents, or values that you've created yourself, what your belief system is about what you can and cannot do, what is possible for you and your family. And what we do is we take all of that information and we pull it together and we figure out what is your mission and purpose on earth. What were you put here to do? That process, normally I take my clients through that process, and that's a $500 value. You're going to get that completely free. You're going to get a one-on-one analysis of your current state of your wealth, what I call your personal economy. That consultation, typically I charge $2,500 for that. That consultation I'm going to waive. It's free. You're also going to get 12 months of mentorship access to my private network of legal and professional advisors, including myself and my team, so you can actually implement this stuff. They typically charge $5,000 for a retainer. You're going to get that completely waived for the first 12 months. You're also going to get 12 months access to our membership platform, which is a library of videos and training sessions. That's typically $1,000 a year. I'm going to waive that. You're going to get that completely free. And if you decide to move forward and set up your own trust and foundation, typically the setup price is $60,000. You're going to get 20% knocked off of that price. That's a $12,000 value completely free. Okay, that's a total value of $20,491 that you're going to get today if you decide to invest in yourself. Now, I understand that information alone is not going to do the trick. Just learning this stuff and watching a couple of videos is not going to get you where you want to go. And so I want to remind you, this has worked for clients like Barry, who only had 8 years left to save for retirement, no hope of being debt-free. But it's also worked for millennials like Jason and Nicole, who are in their 20s, to help them keep their tax dollars and do more good work through their family foundation. It's also worked for families who already are established and have 401ks or IRAs or some kind of nest egg that they own, and they want to be able to exit that nest egg completely tax-free. We can show you how to do that, okay? It's also worked for my family and I. It's been able to allow us to literally help hundreds and hundreds of kids to heal from life's hurts through the Kind Foundation, just by helping to give back more in a more meaningful way. Now, I get it. Old habits die hard. And I myself, I had two choices when I came up with this offer. The first choice that I had, the first option that I had was I can make this really, really cheap and just sell as many units as I could and get as many people in the door. But I realized that I wouldn't be as available as I'd like to be. I wouldn't be able to coach you, teach you, and train you on this stuff on an ongoing basis. It wouldn't really help you to implement this stuff, all right? The second option requires a little bit more upfront investment on your part, but in exchange, you get a ton more resources so that you can actually pull this off and succeed, okay? Now, this has worked for young entrepreneurs like Preston, who's in the real estate game. He buys and sells real estate all the time. This has also worked for W-2 wage earners like Vishal, who's an airline pilot from Florida, okay, taking W-2 income. And so again, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get the purpose-driven blueprint. That's a $497 value. You're going to get that completely free. You're going to get a thorough one-on-one analysis or review of your current state of your personal economy. That's a $2497 consultation fee, $2,500 consultation fee, completely waived. You get that free. You're going to get 12 months access to my private network of legal and professional advisors. You're going to be able to ask them any questions that you want. Normally, they charge $5,000 retainer. You're going to get that completely free. And you're going to get 12 months access to our membership platform, where we have a library of videos and training sessions within that private network. That's a $1,000 value. You're going to get that completely free. And if you decide to move forward with the trust and foundation setup, instead of paying $60,000, you're going to get a 20% discount just by being a client of mine. That's a $12,000 value. You get that for free. The total value that you're going to get today is $20,491. $20,491 of value with all of this stuff completely free. So I got to ask you a question. If all this did was helped you to increase your bottom line by 40% or more by making one simple decision, would that be worth it to you? If all this did was helped you to grow your wealth and give back more effectively, would it be worth it to you? If all this did was helped you save 90% or more of your tax dollars so you could keep that money and grow that wealth, would it be worth it to you? So what is that worth to you? How much did you pay in taxes last year? How much have you paid in taxes over the last 10 years? What are you going to pay in taxes this year? What is that dollar amount? How much are you going to pay in taxes over just the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 15 years? How much is that going to save you? How much would you pay to keep all of those tax dollars? What would you pay today up front in order to never pay taxes again in your lifetime? Never have your children pay taxes. Your grandchildren will never have to pay taxes. Your grandchildren's children will never have to pay taxes. What would you pay today? So you can see why others that hire me for one-on-one coaching, they pay me $12,500 for the one-on-one coaching to learn this stuff. And typically this is how it works. We charge half up front and then half over the next 3 months as we do the coaching and consulting. And typically it's a 3-month process, okay? They pay $12,500. But if you were able to save 90% of your taxes, imagine what you could do with that money. What kind of vacations would you go on with your family? What kind of donations or gifts could you give to your church or other charities? What kind of investments could you make in real estate or in other things? What kind of investments could you make if you were able to keep all of your tax dollars? So you can understand why even at $5,000, this would be a great deal. And normally for the general public, typically what I charge is $3,000, $2,997 for the general public. But here's the deal. I told you I was going to make you an offer if you waited around and stayed till the end. Here's the deal. Because you've committed to learning this and learning this webinar, wouldn't you agree that just this education alone, that education that you just got over the last hour, that's worth $3,000. Just the education that you got today is worth $3,000. But instead of paying what the general public pays, you can get started right now for $1997. $1997. That's a small investment. Here's what I want you to do next. Go to purposedrivenblueprint.org. Purposedrivenblueprint.org and hit the Apply Now button in the top right-hand corner. Okay? Now you have two choices. First option is 100% risk-free. You can do nothing and keep doing what you're doing. And I want you to think for a minute. How much are you going to pay in taxes this year? How about next year? How about the year after that? How much are you paying in personal taxes? How much are you paying in business taxes? What are you paying in property taxes? What are you paying in county taxes, in state tax, in federal tax? If you continue doing the same thing, what is it going to look like 12 months from today? The second option is that you can join us with just a small investment today compared to all the value you're going to get on the back end in return. And you can decide and make a decision to change your entire bloodline. Here's the deal. That's also 100% risk-free. If this is not a fit for you, you won't be charged anything. So which risk-free option do you want to take? Do nothing and keep paying what you're paying, or make the small investment today? Again, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get the purpose-driven blueprint. That's a $497 value, completely free. You're going to get a thorough one-on-one analysis of your current personal economy, a $2,500 consultation fee, completely free. You're going to get 12 months of access to my private network of legal and professional advisors, including myself and my team. That's a $5,000 retainer, completely free. And you're going to get 12 months access to our membership site, where you're going to see a library of videos and training sessions within that private network. That's a $1,000 value. You get that completely free. You get 20% off the setup price, a $12,000 value, completely free. That's a $20,491 value. You get all of that free. And now, let me tell you about two different clients of mine. Number one is a client that decided to take the easy way out and do absolutely nothing. And so 12 months after first talking to this business owner, I ran into him at Starbucks and I asked him, how was business last year? Oh, business was booming. I said, awesome. How much did you pay in taxes last year? And he's like, way too much. So you can be like him and just continue doing what you're doing today. And that's risk-free, right? Keep doing what you're doing and keep paying Uncle Sam what you're paying him. Or you could completely change your entire family bloodline by making one small decision. So here's what I want you to do next. Apply now. Go to purposedrivenblueprint.org, click on the Apply Now button, and fill out the application. We'll have a phone call over the phone. I'll take your credit card information, and you can get started right now. Now, I got to tell you, I am nothing special, okay? I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I am not a trust fund baby. I did not grow up with the same kind of wealth as Warren Buffett, Bill Gates. I am not Ellen DeGeneres. I am not Andy Roddick. I am not one of those guys that has these massive amounts of wealth. But at the same time, my wife and I have been able to live a life full of meaning and purpose and legacy and fulfillment. We're actually teaching our kids how to give back more and how to use philanthropy every single day in their lives, changing their lives in the process. So here's what you need to do next. Go to purposedrivenblueprint.org, fill out the application, click the Apply Now button, and fill out the application. Let's have a conversation. Let's get started. Again, here's what you're going to get. When you sign up, you're going to get a $500 purpose-driven blueprint, absolutely free. You're going to get $2,500 consultation fee for a one-on-one analysis and review of your current personal economy, completely free. You're going to get 12 months access to my private network of legal and professional advisors, a $5,000 retainer free value, completely free. You're going to get 12 months access to our membership platform. That's a $1,000 value where you can train and look at all of the videos in there, learn all of the nuts and bolts on how to pull this off. You get that completely free. And you're going to get 20% off the setup price, a $12,000 value, completely free. Again, the total value you're going to get today is $20,491 of value and all this stuff, and all of that for just a small investment of $19.97 today. So apply now. Go to purposedrivenblueprint.org, click the Apply Now button. I look forward to seeing you on the inside.